David, and Wayne. We're in the shop today. Chinese water torture and fabrication. So we got the Gladiator on the lift. We'll go over some of the stuff I'm doing to that, but more importantly, what's up, Lewis? Jason and I have been cranking on the two-door JL the last 2 days, and it's got tires on it again. So approximate ride height ish.
Pretty close.
Gotta start somewhere. So with that approximate ride height, let's see if I can get the camera square. Right about there is the back of the body. You can see the other tail light over there poking out. We haven't finished the corners yet because don't need tail lights if it can't move or sit on its own weights. We've been working on suspension. But there's a 6-inch stretch two-door JL. So still got some things to work out, but control arm geometry is where we want it. We've got control arms mocked up and checked. The upper third link needs a little tweak yet. We started with an existing part, see if we could kill two birds with one stone, but of course no. Almost. Same with the rear track bar. You see the bracket way over yonder. We're gonna end up, when it's all said and done, what did we say, 45, 47? 45, 45-inch long rear track bar, which will make the roll center pitching. So you can see where the track bar mount is. You can sneak that link in and around the caliper, the sway bar end link, which that's another piece I just checked here a little while ago. We can get the rear sway bar on it. We'll have to fab some brackets up, but they'll be pretty easy for the installer. Speaking of installing, we have the truss. So you put the truss on, it's kind of self-explanatory, and then the coil bucket bumps to the end of the truss, which puts that on the right center line. The lower control arms obviously are out there kind of in no man's land, so we have an idea for a little cut guide jig thing that will bump off of the backing plate for the brakes. So you hold that little piece in and tack weld it in if you want. I don't know if you can't hold two things at once. Hold that in, slide the control arm mount up against it, and that puts the control arm mounts where they have to be. I haven't tackled the bump stops yet because the factory ones don't work. They're 6 inches farther forward than where they need to be. So we'll get creative and come up with something there, but until I got track bar and control arms and can cycle it and run it up and down and twist it side to side and do all that to find out where the bump stop actually is, I probably won't deal with them for another day or two. But other than that, we're progressing. We have a plan of attack on shocks that I'm not going to tell you until they're in there. Factory location doesn't work because the diff is now pretty much under the factory upper mount. So we're going to take a page out of our long arm coilover kit book and kind of mix a little magic in that and make some shock mounts for this. So that'll happen maybe tomorrow. Got to get all the arms finalized and welded. They're just tacked, and we're pretty damn good welders here, but I don't trust tacks when I start cycling suspension. Things like to go kaboing, and then we got parts laying on the floor, and I'm too old to bend over and pick that kind of shit up. So we'll get the arms welded up so we can actually use them and cycle everything and nothing come apart on us. So that's this afternoon's project. I got some more computer work to do, and then I'll have Jason run it through the 3D models and make sure all my angles and measurements are where I want them. And for the sway bar, hopefully I can get sway bar put back on it this afternoon, so I know where that is and know what I have to work around, and for the next piece that's got to go back on. But so far the kit's going to be, that ain't for the faint of heart, and I'll show you why. Because all of this stuff has to come out, some of which will go back in. That was probably the worst piece to get out. That's the gas filler pipe. It is installed from the factory in such a place that if you start cutting things, you could potentially blow the Jeep up. So,
and they put it on before they put the body in.
Yeah, that goes in before the body goes on. So it is a real son of a gun to get out of there. But then you get to do destructo, and all of that trash comes out. So there's, for those in the know, there's lower control arms with seized bolts. The bolts would not come out, they are seized, so I can cut around things. So they stayed in the mount, and the mount died. Mount was coming off anyway. What else is laying there? Factory upper control arms. The factory coil buckets are down under there. There's a factory lower control arm mount that used to be on the chassis. There's pieces of the factory upper control arm. Those are kind of a bugger to get off because they are right up against the backing plate and the flange of the axle, so those get to come off in pieces. There's that
Axle
one.
side coil
That's
bucket.
the axle lower coil bucket. Those gotta go. Exhaust, tailpipe, yeah, that's out of here.
Track bar mount.
There's the axle track bar mount, same thing, bolt is seized in that, so it stayed with the bracket. This young fella that owns this Jeep needs to learn how to do maintenance, and if you're going to live anywhere other than the desert, you need to learn what anti-seize is and how to use it, because what a mess. There's the evap canister. Obviously that has to go back in to keep your government happy. So we have some ideas, but that's one of them.
We gotta get a little further before we can make that plan.
Farther into the project before we can decide where that's going to final resting place is going to be. So far it looks like the brake lines will all go back in it. Have to have a little creative unbending and rebending to the factory steel line, but that's fairly straightforward. So if you're careful, you should be able to put this kit in and never have to bleed brakes, because you never open the system. Just take the caliper off and get it out of your way while you're doing all your destructive work, and then a little reshaping of the factory line, and drill a couple of holes to mount the bracket, maybe a tweak on the bracket, maybe a new bracket, we'll see. But you know, I've been doing this a really long time. Pretty handy with a gas axe and grinders and implements of destruction, and I have a little over 16 hours to get to a clean bare frame where we could even start putting anything together. This kit will not be for the faint of heart. Instas need not apply. So what are we doing over here on the Gladiator? Well, I think we've showed you these, but it's been a few sleeps. We're changing the rear suspension height. We make a 1-inch spacer. So there's 1 inch. We make a 2-inch spacer. There's 2 inch. And we make a 3-inch spacer. There's 3 inch. These were previously in the silver Gladiator. I think that's why they're a little, and they were somewhat of a prototype, so they got rattle canned instead of powder coated. That's why they're a little rusty. We typically don't see rusty parts around here, but we make a 1 inch, a 2 inch, and a 3 inch spacer system for the rear suspension on the Gladiator, because I haven't found an aftermarket spring that's worth putting in my Jeep. Your individual results will vary, but I have a pretty unique Gladiator. They're heavy, like stupid heavy, and all the aftermarket springs just they can't hang. So we've been running factory Gladiator Max Toe, which is the highest GVW rated spring that Jeep makes, with decent results. Last fall I started experimenting with a different spring, still from the Chrysler group, but this time from the Ram pickup line. We're currently running half-ton, so 1500 Ram Rebel, which the Rebel model, I guess that's the word I'm looking for, is kind of the Rubicon of the half-ton pickups, if that makes sense. So they sit a whisker taller than a standard half-ton, and they're a little softer spring than a standard half-ton. The Rebel, as the little bit of research I did, has a little lighter GVW rating than a standard half-ton, kind of like the Power Wagon versus a standard 3/4 ton. The vehicle weight rating, or the payload, that's what I'm looking for. The payload is a little lighter on a Power Wagon as it is on a Rebel. So little farm boy logic and math on that says it's a little lighter spring rate, and seat of the pants meter says sweet. I ran them on the fall expedition last fall, fully loaded, pulling a trailer, so I had a little tongue weight to boot, all over hell and gone on the North Rim, and it really worked well. I'm very happy with it. So when the diesel got in the stable, and we had to detune the silver Gladiator for Mary, make it more of a daily driver, highway cruiser, because, well, she's cruising right now. She's over in Nebraska with her daughter. So I detuned that one a little bit, because once we took the RLD off and the fridge and the this and the that and all the other stuff out of the Gladiator, it was kind of like driving a 3/4 ton pickup. So I pulled the Rebel springs and system out of that one and put it all into Frizz's green one, my tail gunner. And then this last trip, last week, we were in the Mojave for Mojave meandering. So he had that same suspension I ran last fall, other than the Radflow shocks. He's just got Falcons on it, but they're decent, decent price point. But springs and spacers and the airbag system I run and blah, 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 was on the green truck. The diesel didn't make the trip because it just ran out of time, because we're working on a lot of things at once around here all of a sudden. So I just rode, and Mary didn't necessarily want to go, and Beth couldn't go, so I just rode right seat with Chris all week. And part of that was not to have to drive. That sounds funny, but I needed a break, and I wanted to just be able to feel the suspension dynamics and how it worked, and yeah, it was on point. So if you're building a heavy Gladiator, you know, call us. We have a solution. And we have a solution. We put this system on just plain Jane daily driver, look cool at the mall Gladiators too. People just want a little lift, 35s, 37s, and we've mixed up the spacer and wedge system to keep the stock spring in their Gladiator. Then we use a lift spring in the front with great results. So there's that. Speaking of 37s on a Gladiator, oh yeah, Bob, you can put 37s under there. They'll fit just fine. Yeah, bullshit. If you got help to winch the spare up and into and out of when you need to use it, so I modified the hitch because a lot of times I'm out by myself and I don't want to have to deal with it. So we took the, I don't know if you can see it. Right, oh, you can see daylight. It's there, trust me. Oh, there it is. So if you look at the back of your factory hitch, there's, I measured 2 or 3 of them, and they're all within 30 thou. But between 1/4 and 5/16 of the factory tube, the receiver tube here that sticks through like so, we took all that off and flushed it up with the back of the bracket, and then I welded on the opposite side because the factory welds on the back side. So once you cut all that off, all the weld is gone, and smooth it out. So we put the weld on this side. Shouldn't really affect anything. I don't plan on towing anything heavy. It's not a real truck in that scheme of how things work. So, and I have rail trucks for pulling trailers and other Jeeps and whatnots. But it'd pull we didn't change any rating or anything on it. So, you know, your little camp trailer or whatever, side-by-side trailer, you know, whatever you're comfortable pulling with a Gladiator should still be fine. But now the 37 goes up and in. Just crank the winch thing up and it sucks it right in, and it's not buried in the track bar. So, just those little tips. The Yokohamas, they're pretty good size 37. They're pretty true to size. So if you're running a short 37, and you guys know who makes them, then you probably don't have any problems. But if you got a true to size 37, it is a shoehorn in there. So we got that. Other than that, that's about all that's going on around here. Jason and I are just cranking out, trying to get this thing back on 4 legs and get it back over to the other shop so they can finish the armor and the rest of the armor. The rest of the armor. The Guardian sliders have been started, but we kind of put all that on hold. I had an opening over here to do suspension work because they don't have a 2-post lift, so it's kind of hard to cycle suspension on a drive-on lift. So we brought it over here. I had an opening, and we're getting close. By the end of the week, this should be back out of here and back over to manufacturing, where Jason can use the 4-post lift, which you know, that works bitching for working on armor because you can raise the Jeep up to eye level instead of having to sit on the floor or do anything crazy. So you can get the rest of the armor going next week, and the bumper idea we have, because the fact with 6 inches of stretch, there's no way you're going to put a bumper back on it.
I'll work with it out there.
So, and there's probably a couple bumpers that would be close, but you'd still have to modify them. So we're just going to start from scratch and build a cool little bumper for it that kind of goes with the theme of this Jeep. Probably leave it bare. It's rusty when he gets it because that kind of goes with the theme of this Jeep. Yeah, Corey, that was a dig. So we still got to put a front Guardian on. That's why the grill and everything's off, because we're still trying to figure out what we're doing with that cooler, because it's in the way, because that's where the winch goes. So we've got some ideas there to relocate that elsewhere. So that's got to get done yet. You know, when you're, it sounds cool on Instagram or YouTube or wherever you get your off-road news from. To do all this stuff. Oh yeah, it's easy. Oh, I had to make such a bitchin' crawler. Oh, it's so cool. Oh. Yeah, careful what you wish for. Like I said, I got 16 hours just in destruction, and that's on the rear. We're not going to do anything to the front on this go around. We'll see how the customer knows his Jeep, knows how it wheels, knows whatever, so I don't want to change anything in the front end. Till we get some feedback on the rear. We have some ideas to do the front. There again, they're not going to be for the faint of heart. You know, I don't have a problem cutting up Jeeps. Looks back through our history. We've chopped up a lot of them and made some really cool stuff that actually works. The rear suspension on this, we've kind of mentioned it a couple times. It's not that hard to put on. Everything has been thought through. It kind of, we like to say around here, auto locates. So like the lower control arm mounts here, I'm just kind of looking over the phone at different things. You know, they slip right in the body mount. You can't really screw them up. As long as you can get them on straight, meaning left to right, but front to back, it is what it is. The upper coil buckets we're working on, which are at about 90%, they bolt in right there to the existing sway bar mount. I mean, it's all got to get welded, but you don't have to think and measure and go, oh, was it 6 5/8 from that cross member or 7 3/4? Oh shit, I don't remember. Just put the bolts in it, and it is what it is. It bolts right in, and wherever it touches the frame, start welding. Track bar mount we have dreamed up. We kind of sketched it out this morning for the chassis. Will be very similar. Once the upper coil bucket's in place, you can take them bolts out, and don't throw the bolts away. You still need them. Those bolts will then auto-locate where the chassis side track bar goes. Put the bolts back in the factory inserts, tighten everything down where it touches the frame, start welding. You know, it's all pretty easy for somebody that has some skill. Like I said, you got a lot of destruction. There's a lot of sensitive stuff in these things. Plastic lines, wire harnesses running here, there, and everywhere. We've got all the wiring, factory wiring, from the tail lights forward removed, and it's all wadded up where the gas tank normally resides to keep it from melting or getting damaged, because you know it's all CAN bus operated systems. They're very sensitive, and they're very small wires, like 20 gauge. if you manhandle them, you will break the wires. So, and Jeep didn't do us any favors. There again, all that wiring and brake lines and fuel lines and emission lines and all that baloney was put on the chassis before they put the body on. So there are some of them clips. They're no fun to get out, but they got to come out, and you got to get all of that stuff out of your way, because one errant blast of the torch or wave of the torch while you're lining up for your next cut, and lines are cut, hoses are melted, so it's all got to go. Which, whatever comes out, it's got to go back in. So you know, there's a bunch of stuff. We said not for the faint of heart. Be a cool Jeep when it's done, but not an easy install. So, but that's most of our stuff. We don't care about cutting shit off and moving stuff. There's no point in just having a 6-inch stretch that bolts all into the factory locations, because the factory geometry sucks. I mean, it's fine for a stock Jeep going to the mall, but
not for this.
As soon as you lift these, the rear geometry just goes down the toilet bad. They do really dumb things on really steep things. So the only way to fix that is cut shit off and move it. So that's what we're in the process of. Other than that, I don't know. Jason, you got anything else?
No, not on that. Just keep plugging away on it.
Right. So, like I said, hopefully by Friday this is getting loaded on the trailer and
sit on suspension and go back to the other shop.
Get back over there so we can get all the armor. Is too hard to do over here because, you know, no press brake, no iron worker, no presses, no any of that. So we spend more time running back and forth while we're making stuff than to do it over there. So, and I need the space over here. So that's where it's headed. Hope maybe next week when Mary's doing this, because she's out of town. What's up, Coop?
Be sitting on weight.
It'll be sitting back on 440s and springs and shocks and all of that good stuff. And then Jason him and I can finish the armor up over there. That's mostly his department. I point and go, move that over here, move that, kind of a few styling cues, but other than that, he did the corners and hit them right off the get-go. So I know there's been a bunch of chatter about another set of corners that are out there that have a big, humongous cutout right there, so that you can keep the factory tail light. Why you would want to do that is beyond me, but whatever. We've already showed you the corners a couple of times. We use the French light, either the Max Built Trail Tail or the ORO light dot. They are both the same dimension and are interchangeable. You choose which one you like. We tend to favor the Max Built Trail Tails. We've done both, whatever the customer wants. But if you smash one of those taillights, get the Sawzall out, because the Jeep's pretty much hammered. So, if you're just doing a 6-inch stretch to go to the mall, don't waste your money. Buy a 4-door, buy a Gladiator, buy a LJ, whatever. You do not need a 6-inch stretch to go to the mall. You need the 6-inch stretch if big, steep things are your forte. This one, it's very similar geometry. There's a few little tweaks because there's a few things that are different in the chassis on these than a 2-door JK, but they're very similar. And our 2-door JKs they're climbing fools. So I'm expecting very similar results on this.
With the mid-arm in the front?
Yeah, and then if we can someday figure out the front end, We have a pretty capable Jeep. This, the way we've penciled in or kind of sketched what we're doing for a shock mount, could be a coilover mount. More to come on that. That one will require some additional pieces to your Jeep, meaning a wider axle or spacers or whatever floats your boat. Rubicon width at a minimum, and probably going to have to put a spacer on it because there just isn't room.
It's a 3-inch backspace wheel.
Or yeah, roller skate type back spacing on your wheels. So, which that never does the front end any favors when you do that. So there will be some requirements, but there is a path to coilovers. We've already been kind of holding some stuff in there and thinking, yeah, well, Chris P's LJ's a little more than mall rated. It's fully capable of going to the mall, but it's also capable of going a few other places. So, as proved by he just drove it to California and back its real first maiden voyage. You know, he's poked around Minnesota a little bit and went to the grocery store and whatever he does up there in Minnesota. Went to the bait shop probably to get bait to go fishing. This, he asked a couple weeks ago, what do you think? I'm like, you built the damn thing to drive it. So we did a little tune-up work prior to, rearrange the sway bars a little bit because with a rooftop tent, it wasn't a lot of fun to drive because it's top heavy and it's got Curry anti-rocks on both ends, so it really doesn't have enough sway bar for that kind of top weight. But he drove it out there. We had a hydraulic assist clamp fail. Was not a PSC. We'll just leave that at that. So we ended up having to take the hydraulic assist off of it, and that he liked that better because now it's not twitchy. I mean, hydraulic assist at 80 miles an hour on the interstate with a rooftop tent and light sway bars, yeah, that's a little interesting, especially when we left here in like 35 mile an hour plus winds. It got really entertaining on a few places on I-80, and some of the back roads we took to get down there through some canyons. It wasn't a canyon carver, that's for sure. But rooftop tent came off of it this morning. Chris has now decided that's not for him, which it's not for everybody. Rooftop tents are a lot of work. You know, you're always up and down a ladder, you gotta fold stuff up, you gotta tuck shit in, you gotta put a ladder away, you gotta put a cover on, blah, 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 blah. You know, you guys know the drill. Everybody's dealt with, most people have dealt with them. And Chris's idea of overlanding / rock crawling, whatever mode we do, he would like something less cumbersome in camp. You know, the whole point of going on the 4 exploring trip is break out your lawn chair and just hang out while Chris and I and Mary and Beth, when they come, do all the work. So he was doing a lot of that work himself because I lead, I cook, that's it. I'm not setting your tent up, I'm not tucking you in at night. You're all big kids. So he wants to ditch the rooftop tent and go something similar to the Mojave LJ with an interior system that he can just sleep, fold it all up in the morning, put it away, and have a nice flat platform if he's got a dog with him, and at night lay it all out, crawl in, shut the door, and do it all over again the next day. So that makes probably a lot more sense for how he's going to use this Jeep in the future. So, yeah. I don't know, I'm just rambling at this point, so I guess it's time for lunch. When you do this live thing, the clock goes away. Oh yeah, it's 12:35. So that's what we got in the shop. If you need something built that doesn't fit the normal mold, call us. It's kind of our specialty. If you need some bitch and parts to do it yourself, call Tanner or Mary. You know, we build this eventually. Don't think you're going to order this kit next week. But
We gotta get some drivability.
we gotta get some driving and miles and wheeling and check a few things. But like I said, we've been doing this a while. It's going to be right there. And you know, then run everything through manufacturing and figure out how to build the jigs, how to make all the parts and inventory them and all of that fun stuff that Mary does. So that takes time. Web material and marketing material and building web pages and blah, 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 blah. All that stuff I don't do. Not my deal. I just make cool parts and cool Jeeps. Fix cars once in a while. So, but we should be up and running soon. The corners and armor will probably be available well before the suspension. Just because, you know, if a corner fails, you don't die and your family doesn't sue me. If suspension fails, yeah, that's a problem. So we like to give that a little more testing instead of just armchair quarterbacking it on 3D CAD and going, ooh, that's going to be cool. Make 10,000 of them and sell them. Yeah, that ain't how it works around here. So we'll see. In the interim, if you're hell-bent for leather to have a stretch JL, call us. We can discuss and get you on the schedule and, you know, build you your dream Jeep. So that's kind of what we do around here. So with that, say bye, Jason.
You guys.
So probably see Jason and Mary next week over at manufacturing, and probably see more of, whoops, the wrong button.
This one coming together.
See more of that one in more final states. So with that, I'm gonna go find some lunch. So talk to you guys later. See ya.